We're a family of elites, so a poor high school dropout like you should just leave. My mother-in-law, Shelly, said this as she shoved my sister, Macy. Because she judges everything by academic background, Shelly doesn't see Macy's true qualities. That's probably why she can say such cruel things. Not wanting Macy around for even a second, Shelly was trying to drive her out of the workplace right at the spot. Watching this unfold, I couldn't help but let something slip. Well then, your husband is fired. Shelly was shocked, and I ended up explaining the situation to her. In truth, it wasn't something I should have said, but there's a deep reason behind it. When Shelly heard the reason, she was left in a state of stunned silence. It seemed she really had no idea. As I spoke, Shelly grew increasingly confused. My name is Mason Cole. I'm a 38-year-old man who dreams of having a pet. I have a wife named Yvonne. She's a year younger than me at 37, and was my junior in high school. Like me, Yvonne is interested in having a pet. So, we're thinking it might be time to welcome a dog or cat into our lives. When we discussed it, our conversation went like this. Do you have any preference for the breed, Yvonne? No, not at all. Mixed breeds are totally fine, and I think adopting a rescued pet would be great. At first, we thought of adopting from a pet shop. But now we're considering helping animals that have been abandoned or mistreated by their previous owners. Right now, we're attending a few adoption events, looking for a pet that would be a good match for us. The reason I want to bring a pet into my life goes back to an experience I had as a child. I grew up with my father, mother, sister, and a male dog named Shadow, but I lost much of my family in a car accident. When my sister and I were paralyzed with shock after the crash, Shadow pulled us from the car, saving our lives. Shadow ran back to our parents, only to be caught in the explosion when the car went up in flames. Of course, our parents didn't survive either, and we could only stand there, crying as we watched the scene. Mason, Mom, and Dad are gone. What's going to happen to us? I don't know, Macy. I really don't know. To this day, I regret not being able to comfort my sister Macy as she sobbed. The happiness we had vanished in an instant, and that was the hardest day of my life. After that, my sister and I were taken in by our grandparents, but that incident left a dark shadow in our hearts. I once vowed never to have another pet, yet here I am, feeling drawn again to the warmth I had as a child and ready to welcome a pet once more. You were saved by a dog once, weren't you? That's why you chose to work in the pet industry, right? Yeah, I want to pay back the kindness Shadow showed me by helping other animals. After graduating from college, I founded a company that sells pet supplies, and now I work as its president. One of my wishes now is to make the new pet I welcome into my life as happy as possible, in memory of Shadow. So every day, I work hard to achieve this goal. Driving to work and admiring the fully bloomed cherry blossoms, I walked through the company building. Employees around me greeted me as I passed by. Good morning, Mr. Cole. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Their faces looked lively and motivated. I always try to stay aware of how my team is doing because I want to keep a close eye on the well-being of everyone in the company. Today, seeing that there weren't any issues, I felt relieved. It's been around 20 years since I started this company, and we've never had any major problems. I understood that smooth operations require not just a few executives but the strength and dedication of a large number of general employees. Perhaps that's because I remember my father confiding in my mother about the struggles at his own company. A few of the so-called elites tend to go overboard, making things tough for the rank-and-file employees. We'd be lost without them. But the higher-ups don't understand that. They threaten people with termination to keep them in line. All right, I understand. But please don't vent like that in front of the kids. I'll listen as much as you need. My father seemed to have quite a grumbling nature, and whenever things got tough, he would rely on my mother to lend an ear. But it's probably these memories that helped me manage to run this company. Lost in my thoughts about the past, I found myself arriving at my office. I entered the room, took out my work tools, and immediately got down to business. There's a mountain of tasks to tackle, but I have to stay on top of things for the 4,000 employees working at this company. As I reviewed the documents, I looked over the materials on the dog crate design from the development department and scheduled upcoming meetings with major clients. Tonight, I'll enjoy a nice dinner and get to see Macy after so long. I'd better bring my A game. The workload is heavy, but to keep my motivation up, I thought about tonight's plans and muttered to myself. When you're immersed in work, time really flies by. Though it felt like I had just arrived, it was already lunchtime. Right then, the announcement came over the PA system, letting everyone know it was break time. Is it that time already? Working nonstop probably isn't efficient, so I'll take a short break. I set aside the stack of papers and pulled out the lunchbox my wife had made for me. Filled with my favorite foods and a good amount of vegetables, I could feel her care in it, and it soothed my tired mind. As I enjoyed the meal, thoughts of welcoming a new pet into our lives crossed my mind. Just as I finished eating, I noticed an email from Yvonne on my phone. It was about the dinner plans we had tonight. Tonight, it'll be me, Yvonne, and my mother-in-law, Shelly, having dinner together. However, it seems Shelly will be running a bit late. Mom said she's not coming after all. Do you think she really dislikes Macy that much? Feeling a bit disappointed, I replied with a simple, "Got it," and turned my gaze away from the screen. I married Yvonne when I was 20, so we've been together quite a while now. However, I haven't had many opportunities to talk with Shelly. One reason is that Shelly runs a well-known advertising agency. With her busy schedule, I couldn't ask her to make time, so we haven't had many chances to connect. Another reason is her focus on academic backgrounds. She seems to think like this about people with lower education levels. I just don't want to associate with people who only have a high school diploma or less. I mean, they haven't properly learned what they should. Right? Being around people like that could lead to rude behavior. I want to properly introduce my sister Macy to Shelly, but that belief of hers has made it difficult. After all, Macy only graduated from middle school. She endured a lot of bullying from other girls in school, so she managed to finish middle school but didn't go on to high school. Maybe she grew tired of trying to navigate relationships. Mason, I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm scared of being around people. Back then, I was determined to raise Macy well as her older brother, but hearing that made me feel powerless. Thankfully, Macy was able to recover a few years later, but since Shelly knows she didn't complete high school, she's unwilling to meet her. I wish they could somehow come to an understanding, but I still don't know how to make that happen. A few hours later, after finishing work, I headed to a particular hotel. I walked under a Norin curtain with a Japanese design, and a woman greeted me with a welcome. I casually spoke to her. "Are you doing your job properly? Not slacking off, I hope. We've got some important guests tonight." "Of course. I've put my best effort into tonight's dishes, so be sure to savor them." The person who brought me a hand towel and a glass of water was my sister, Macy. She has been cooking at the restaurant for over a decade as an apprentice. She fell in love with the taste of Japanese cuisine at her coming-of-age ceremony and became an apprentice. Now, she's training hard to eventually take over the restaurant. You're not causing any trouble for the owner, are you? Of course not. When Mason's running your company as president and I'm managing this place, we'll easily be able to care for a pet or two. I need to work hard for that, too. Well, that sounds good, then. Oh, don't believe me? If you keep talking like that, I'll load your meal with extra chili peppers. Since Macy and I live separately, it's been a while since we've seen each other. Because our homes are a bit far apart, we can't just casually drop by each other's places. So even small conversations feel special and make me happy. Back when she was in middle school, she used to call me Big Brother, but now she just calls me by my name. It's a bit lonely. But I take it as a sign of her independence and hold back from saying anything. Maybe that's why we were joking around so much. Am I being left out while you flirt here? You two seem to be getting along well. Yvonne teased as she arrived a bit late. She joined me at the table, and Macy went back to the kitchen to bring her a hand towel and a glass of water. She's my sister, you know that, right? Of course. I was just teasing you. By the way, where's Shelly? Yvonne slurred her words as she averted her gaze. She looks at Mason with an apologetic expression. It seems Dad mentioned to Mom that she'd be seeing Macy here tonight, and she got upset and decided she didn't want to come. I was hoping to keep it a secret until we actually got here to avoid this. I see. I figured that might happen, but it's still disappointing. Hearing this, I remembered the apologetic look on the face of one of my male employees I spoke to before leaving the office. Truthfully, I had already been informed by one of my employees that Shelly wouldn't be coming tonight. Even though I knew ahead of time, it still felt like a blow to actually see it play out. Yvonne, who had received the hand towel and water from Macy, continued with a slight shrug. Mom's reputation as someone like that is well known in town. I'm sorry, Macy. No, it's okay. It's true that I only made it up to middle school. I expected this kind of reaction. Watching Macy reply so modestly made me feel a pang of sadness. Macy didn't go down the wrong path or struggle with schoolwork. She simply couldn't keep going to school because of a hostile environment, yet she's judged this way. I just wanted Shelly to see my sister as she truly is and to judge her for herself. Looking over at Macy, she stood there, looking downcast. Yvonne placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It'll be all right, Macy. You're a good person, and I'm sure Mom will come to understand that. I hope so. The restaurant owner kindly offered Macy a break, so the three of us ended up having our meal together. Yvonne sent Shelly a text just in case, but the only reply was, I have other plans and can't make it. In the end, Shelly never showed up. A few days later, I was about to see Shelly in a completely unexpected place. That day, I was lounging at home, enjoying a day off, when I realized the fridge was empty. Since it was nearly lunchtime, I decided to go out shopping, but on the way, I spotted a stray puppy wandering around. With no leash, it didn't seem like it had simply gotten away from the owner. The poor thing was covered in mud, likely from wandering around for days. Maybe it had been abandoned. It had rained just the other day, and the puppy was very dirty because of it. The area around my feet was especially bad, and the mud was gooey. Unable to just leave it there, I approached to try and help, but unfortunately, a car passed by, startling the puppy. Scared, it dashed away at full speed before I could do anything. At that point, there was no way a human could keep up. It was a young pup, but dogs are fast runners. Within seconds, it was out of sight. Worried, I looked around for a while, but couldn't find that muddy little puppy anywhere. While searching for the puppy, for some reason, I thought about the cat Shelly's family looks after. At Yvonne's parents' house, they have a female Maine Coon with a beautifully groomed coat. That cat, always lounging in an air-conditioned room and licking her clean fur, is surely still living a contented life. She was born to purebred Maine Coons, but would she have been given such a comfortable environment if she were a mixed breed? I remember Shelly's words when she introduced her cat. Our cat comes from a solid pedigree. Impressive, isn't it? She's different from those stray mixed-breed dogs and cats you see around. If we were to get another pet, I'd definitely want one from a well-bred line again. That puppy would likely never even be allowed inside her home if it were a mixed breed. In fact, if it happened to wander in by mistake, Shelly might even chase it out. I'm cautious about friends bringing over pets because my cat might get hurt if she interacts with mixed breeds. If they get into a fight and injure each other, well, that's their own problem. But I'd hate for my cat to get caught up in such aggressive behavior. Shelly probably wouldn't even worry if she saw an injured mixed-breed animal. An hour later. Though feeling a bit down about the puppy, I headed to the grocery store. I felt sorry for that dog, but randomly searching wouldn't help, so I had to let it go. To my surprise, I ran into Shelly in the store I entered. It was unexpected to see her here, in this local supermarket that I often use. Because Shelly never wanted to go into these common stores. Yvonne had told me that she always went shopping at high-end department stores, but I wondered why. "Good to see you, Shelly." Since I couldn't just ignore her, I greeted her. Shelly looked at me with a surprised expression. "Oh, hello, Mason." As I wondered about her reaction, she quickly began explaining. "Don't get the wrong idea. I never come to these common supermarkets that only sell cheap items." Apparently, Shelly saw shopping at a supermarket as beneath her. She spoke in a way that could easily offend the hardworking women trying to save money on household expenses. "I'm meeting an old friend, and I just remembered that they have a child. I realized I forgot to bring a gift, so I came here. I couldn't just show up empty-handed, that would be rude, wouldn't it? I don't think it would be a big deal. While a gift is nice, if you're reconnecting with an old friend, it's probably not something they'd expect. Besides, there's no need to feel obligated to buy one out of sheer formality. Our family has the means, so it's only natural to make this effort." It seemed Shelly didn't want to talk about this any longer. As she quickly shifted the conversation back to me. "Mason, do you still shop at places like this? As a company president, you should shop somewhere that matches your status." "I think you make a fair point, but I've never really gotten used to luxury. I thought of the employees working in my company. Some of them work hard with the aim of enjoying the finer things in life. For someone in my position, living according to my income is probably expected. However, I grew up in modest circumstances. And that's largely thanks to my grandparents, who raised us for many years. Having experienced a time with few possessions, they taught us how to make do with what we had, and it's made me live in a similar way even now. As a president, I know my lifestyle might make it harder for others to indulge, but my life runs smoothly with discounted or frozen foods. So I haven't felt the need to change." As I explained, Shelly suddenly noticed something. "So Macy works here, huh?" "Huh?" Confused as to why she'd bring up Macy, I followed her gaze. There, at the cash register, was Macy. It looked like she'd taken on a job here in addition to her work at the Japanese restaurant. I had no idea she was working here. She must have picked up this job without telling me. What do you think of that, Mason? You're a president, yet your sister. Of course, Shelly had no idea that Macy was employed at a reputable restaurant. She knew a bit about my background, but since she'd never interacted with Macy, she had almost no understanding of her. She'd probably never guessed that the restaurant she was invited to was where Macy worked. That place, nestled within a luxury hotel, is well known, especially for its authentic Japanese cuisine prepared by Japanese chefs, so if Shelly knew, she'd surely be stunned. She only made it to middle school, so of course, she can't get any decent job. If she can only manage this kind of work, who knows what kind of crude things Macy might say. Hearing those words, I felt anger well up inside me. In my line of sight, Macy was smiling and chatting warmly with the customers at the register. One of her best qualities is her ability to connect with each person with kindness and a cheerful spirit. I wished Shelly could put aside her fixation on academic credentials and see the person standing in front of her for who she truly is. How embarrassing it must be to work so happily at a job anyone could do. I believe every job is honorable. It's not right to talk like that. Sure, jobs that require rare skills are impressive, but that doesn't make other jobs any less valuable. Every job is essential, and if there were no one to do it, we'd all be in trouble. I wondered why Shelly thought that way. And choosing my words carefully, I tried to get her to reconsider. Yes, being a middle school graduate may limit her job options, but that doesn't define her entire future. Please don't judge someone solely based on their educational background. Shelly looked at me, surprised, as if she hadn't expected me to disagree. That's just idealism. Reality isn't so kind. That might be true. But even people with prestigious jobs aren't always happy. Isn't that also a reality? If someone is happy in their work, isn't that enough? In fact, I was relieved Macy hadn't been forced into further education that might have broken her spirit. If I had pressured her to conform to societal expectations and something had happened, I would never have been able to face my parents in the afterlife. After sharing my thoughts, I watched Shelly's reaction. She lowered her gaze, muttering with dissatisfaction, "Education is important. Mason, you're wrong." With that, Shelly, for some reason, began walking toward Macy. Sensing an uneasy tension, I quickly followed after her. A few seconds later, Shelly approached Macy at the register and spoke to her in a cold, flat voice. "Because of you, Mason's perspective has become so warped. Do you realize you're just a burden to him? It's appalling how much trouble you've caused the family." Shocked by Shelly's sudden appearance, Macy stood frozen, looking utterly confused. "If I were him, I wouldn't recognize someone like you as family. If it weren't for you, I'd have no objections to Mason and Yvonne being together." Hearing this, Macy's face fell as she looked down, tears welling up. Perhaps it triggered memories of the bullying she endured in middle school. I rushed to protect Macy, a precious part of my family, but I was a bit too late. "I've reached my limit. I don't want you anywhere near us anymore. Leave this place immediately." With those words, Shelly shoved Macy, who was still standing there in shock. "We're an elite family. Poor, uneducated people like you should go home." Arriving at the scene, I took in what had happened with rising anger. Anger like I had never felt before. So I did something I shouldn't have as the president of a company. "Then consider your husband fired." Shelly stared at me, stunned, as she gasped, "What? I'm the president of a company with 4,000 employees, one of whom is your husband." Even Macy looked at me, equally puzzled. "I knew you were a president, but I had no idea there were so many employees." Shelly, so focused on education, had paid little attention to anything else. She didn't seem to know much about me or even her own husband. For now, I needed to calm the situation, as people around us had started to take notice. Shortly after, Ryan, the store manager, arrived, having heard the commotion, and I briefly explained the situation to him. Ryan, out of kindness, offered us the use of the employee lounge to discuss things privately. Inside the lounge, a large table and several chairs allowed us to sit down and settle ourselves. Since Macy was still on her shift, she remained at the register. The lounge seemed to have been used recently, as there were items left scattered on the table. Likely left behind by employees who had hurriedly exited to give us privacy. There were dolls made of beads, some candy, and notebooks for studying on the table. Shelly, sitting across from me, watched my face, clearly noting my frustration. "Do you really not understand why I'm angry?" "I don't." "Have I been disrespectful to you in some way?" Shelly truly didn't seem to grasp the reason for my anger. For her, judging others by their education level was just a normal part of life. "You haven't done anything to me personally, but I can't ignore the disrespectful way you spoke to Macy." "And why is that?" "Surely, you must wish she wasn't your sister." Shelly tilted her head, frowning. I tried to recall if I'd ever acted in a way that could have given her such a misunderstanding, but I couldn't remember anything of the sort. I've always treated Macy with care and respect. I've never once thought of Macy as a burden or a hindrance. Even though she's only a middle school graduate? Even though all she can do is work part-time at a register? Shelly glanced toward the room's entrance, but I kept my eyes fixed on her. I knew I had to maintain eye contact to convey my true feelings. "Are you proud of family only if they're well-educated? If they're intelligent, they're needed, if not, they're disposable? That's just common sense, isn't it?" I wondered if Shelly thought the same way about her own daughter, Yvonne. I felt a surge of anger, a strong urge to shout at her, but I barely managed to hold it in. Out of her sight, I clenched my fists tightly on my lap. I believe a person's worth isn't defined solely by their education. Macy's value is shown through her actions and her words. Couldn't you, just once, look at Macy for who she truly is? Shelly looked a bit taken aback by my words and picked up one of the beaded dolls on the table. She arranged the dolls so that one was isolated, with the others distanced from it. People without proper education are all unreliable. I've seen plenty of such people myself, and besides, my parents, whom I deeply respect, always said the same. They can't be wrong. Her expression turned oddly sad as she flicked the isolated doll, causing it to topple over. Shelly, who's lived longer than I have, might have her own painful past that shaped her views. But I couldn't accept her outright dismissal of Macy's entire being. So, I decided to tell her something I'd been keeping to myself. All right. Then, you'd reject your husband, too, if he's no longer elite? Shelly's face shifted, and she looked at me with a sudden intensity. What are you talking about? You mentioned something earlier, what did you mean by that? Clearly, she had no idea. She focused so much on education that she hadn't truly looked at the people around her. I decided to give Kent, Shelly's husband, a call. After a few minutes on the phone, I turned back to Shelly. Shelly, please listen to me calmly. With Kent's permission, I knew I had to tell her everything. Shelly seemed to sense that something unusual had happened. She listened to my story with a stern expression on her face. Don't keep me in suspense. What's going on with my husband? He was laid off from his previous company a few months ago. What? But I took him in and hired him at my own company. He has a strong knowledge of cats, so he's been a valuable asset. Shelly looked shocked, her gaze fixed on the toppled doll in front of her. How did this happen? It started over something minor, apparently. He got into a fight with his boss after his boss insulted you and Yvonne. Kent? He's so mild-mannered. I'd felt the same way when I first heard the story. I'd met Kent a few times, and he had always come across as a calm and reserved person. However, it seemed to be true that Kent had gotten into a fight. For him to get angry, what could have possibly happened? Shelly asked, clearly unsettled. Recalling what I knew, I began explaining to her. Both Yvonne and you are devoted to volunteer work, aren't you? Yes, that's right. We try to participate in charity events and local cleanups whenever we can. Shelly, despite her differing values, had a kind side and often volunteered to help those in need or to improve the local community. Yet, there are people who can't understand why anyone would do such things. Unbelievable. I can't understand that. What Yvonne and Shelly do is admirable. But sadly, there are people who see it as nothing more than hypocrisy. Kent's boss ridiculed you and Yvonne for volunteering for selfish reasons and said that you girls were living a lavish lifestyle using donated money. So Kent got angry. As I continued detailing what I knew, Shelly held her head in her hands, clearly struggling to process everything. To think there are people who would see kindness or goodwill in that way. Then you probably feel the same way I do. Because I, too, cannot understand your idea of caring about educational backgrounds. Shelly looked at me, startled, as if something had dawned on her. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but then closed it, remaining silent. I'll excuse myself for today. I'm in no state of mind to think clearly. I understand. I nodded in agreement, feeling equally drained. I knew that pushing my opinion on her would not guarantee that she would change her mind right now. So, perhaps some time apart to cool off and think things over would do us both good. Shelly stood up after carefully putting the beaded dolls back in place. All the dolls now formed a friendly circle. Just before leaving the room, she turned back to me with a question. Earlier, were you serious about firing my husband? I apologize. I went too far. I don't intend to use my position to do such a thing, so please don't worry. Good. Shelly sighed with relief, her face showing signs of exhaustion as she finally left the room. A few days later, while working at the office, I unexpectedly reunited with the puppy I'd been concerned about. Apparently, Kent had found the pup wandering near here earlier and had taken it in. He'd been returning from a client meeting as part of the sales team, and unable to leave the puppy stranded, he brought it back with him. Sorry for causing a fuss again, but I just couldn't leave it out there. When I went to the entrance after hearing from security that there was a bit of a commotion, I saw a somewhat apologetic Kent with the puppy playfully pawing at his leg. I'd been planning to rescue this pup myself, so no worries. I actually lost track of it the other day and was concerned. So I'm more grateful than anything. Thank you for saying so. But what should we do now? For now, we'll have to keep it somewhere safe until work ends. After that, I'll take it to the vet. A microchip might help us find the owner. It's unlikely, considering it might have been abandoned, but it's important to check. The owner might be worried somewhere, so we should make sure. Understood. I'll take responsibility and keep it with my department. Thank you. I appreciate it. Returning to my office, I worked with renewed focus, eager to finish early so I could get the puppy to the vet. Perhaps due to the increased pace, I wrapped up everything half an hour before the end of the workday, a personal record. In the late afternoon, I drove to the animal hospital with the puppy safely contained in a carrier. It was a stroke of luck that my company specializes in pet supplies. I never imagined a carrier from our stock would come in handy this way. Arriving at the hospital, I gently spoke to the puppy in the carrier as I got out of the car. Just hang in there a bit longer. I know it might be uncomfortable. Right at that moment, I ran into Shelly. She was carrying her pet, a female Maine Coon. It seemed like she was there for a regular checkup. I'm here for a checkup. What's that, puppy? It was abandoned, so I came to check if it has a microchip and get it looked at. I see. Must be tough with work and all. We continued our conversation without meeting each other's eyes as we awkwardly entered the clinic together. Since it was my first time, I was a bit unsure, but with Shelly's guidance, I managed to fill out the necessary information at the front desk. While waiting in the lobby, Shelly spoke to me again. Your company deals with pet products, doesn't it? So this situation turned out a bit fortunate, right? Yes, it's been helpful. I feel like Shadow and Heaven would be a bit comforted by this. Shadow? Did you have a pet before? Yes, back when I was a kid. Seeing Shelly's questioning look, I went on to tell her about the pet I used to have. Shelly sniffled slightly, whispering, "So, that happened." After that, we sat in silence for a while, but I noticed Shelly glancing over at the puppy in the crate I was holding. Curious about it? Puppies are adorable, right? Of course, adult dogs have their charm too. No, it's not that. I just don't get why you'd pay so much attention to a mixed breed like that. I mean, it doesn't do you any good. I sighed internally at her words. I had hoped that after our talk at the grocery store, she might have understood my perspective a bit, but that didn't seem to be the case. Choosing who to be with based on what benefits you might get from them feels a bit sad, doesn't it? Isn't it enough to be together simply because you like them? I continued, speaking softly as I looked around. The lobby was reasonably busy, but there wasn't anyone sitting close enough to overhear our conversation. Kent isn't exactly what you'd call an elite, is he? Plus, he was laid off. Wouldn't you consider leaving him? What are you saying? I could never do that. Why not? Don't you want to be part of a successful family? Well, seeing her hesitate, I felt a small sense of relief. Shelly might deny it, but deep down, she probably knew the truth. She was wrong. Yet, her pride wouldn't let her admit it. Fine. If you're saying I should leave him, then I will. Yes, that's what I should do. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. That's what leads to our happiness. She said this in a strained voice, as if desperately trying to convince herself. To me, she looked fragile and painfully vulnerable. People never cared for me as a middle school graduate. It's only natural that they looked down on me. So I struggled and went to college to change my final education. My efforts were not wrong. Shelly's emotions seemed to spill over, and her voice grew louder. Others in the waiting room turned to look at us. I'm absolutely right. It's you all who are wrong. With that, Shelly stormed out of the clinic. Her Maine Coon, left behind on the chair where she'd been sitting, let out a sorrowful meow. I couldn't just leave her like that. Feeling worried, I contacted Yvonne and Kent to ask them to help find Shelly. After the puppy's checkup, I joined in the search myself. After checking several places, we eventually found ourselves by the riverbank. Kent was the first to find her and rushed over to her, who was sobbing by the riverbank. He gently rubbed her back. And only then did I finally feel a sense of relief. Shelly, I'm sorry. I didn't notice your pain, and I wish we'd talked more. I should have told you about the layoff. I know there must have been things that hurt you in the past. Later, I learned that Shelly and Kent spent about an hour there, talking things through. Kent later shared that Shelly once cared for an abandoned kitten by the riverbank, keeping it hidden from her family. Sadly, one day, that kitten was killed by a group of local teenagers. They didn't go on to high school, and they kept causing trouble around the riverbank, which made Shelly obsess over academic achievement. However, it seemed that talking with Kent had finally given her some relief. I've done terrible things to you and Macy. I'm truly sorry. Honestly, it's my fault too for not properly communicating with my wife. I'd like to apologize as well. I'm really sorry. With those words, both of them sincerely apologized to Macy and me. During that conversation, Macy finally shared that she was apprenticing at a well-known Japanese restaurant, and just as I expected, Shelly was surprised. After we wrapped up our talk, Shelly and Kent were thoroughly lectured by Yvonne for making everyone worry, and they both gave a tired smile. I've never seen our daughter so mad before. Same here. Yvonne's definitely not someone you want to upset. We might never be able to stand up to our daughter again. I never expected Shelly and I would agree on something like that. Anyway, the situation was resolved, and Shelly, Kent, and Yvonne got to spend some time together at their family home. But it seems things weren't so easy afterward. With everything that had happened lately, word had spread around the neighborhood. Shelly's behavior at the store and the vet clinic had made its way to quite a few people. I heard that lady has arguments with her husband every night. People who look so composed on the outside probably have a lot of pent-up stress. Which is kind of scary. I know, right? They always boasted about being an elite family, but I bet they're not as impressive on the inside. As a result, rumors started going around about them being on the verge of divorce, or that Shelly was causing trouble for her daughter's in-laws out of spite. Yvonne and I tried to deny these stories whenever we heard them, but Shelly stopped us. I'll accept it as my punishment for the things I've done. Don't worry about it. I'll work steadily to regain people's trust again. Shelly's expression looked oddly at peace as she said this. She and Kent were talking more than ever, so I want to believe that, even if things are rough now, they'll overcome it someday. Amid all this, we decided to keep a pet. Of course, it's the puppy we rescued at the company the other day. We named him Buddy, and he has quite the mischievous personality, keeping us busy every day. But watching him grow little by little brings us so much joy. You're getting bigger, Buddy. Keep growing strong. It's exciting, isn't it? Like us, Macy seems to be doing well. She still has much to learn as an apprentice, but lately, the owner has been trusting her with several menu items. She's even started to develop regular customers who come specifically for her cooking. And there's talk of her potentially taking over the restaurant someday. Still, she makes sure to rest on her days off, so I'm glad she's not pushing herself too hard. We've gone through a lot to get here, but it's moving to think she's so close to becoming a full-fledged chef. Today is one of those days where we get to spend time together at the park with Yvonne, Macy, and Buddy. Buddy! Look, here's the ball. I'm throwing it. Ha ha. If you throw it that far, Buddy might struggle. Oh, wow, look at him. He's jumping so high. Watching Buddy rush toward Macy, who he's grown so attached to, is such a sight. Macy ended up on the ground, covered in dirt after Buddy tackled her. It looked so funny that Yvonne and I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Shadow and our parents aren't here with us, but I feel blessed to share these peaceful moments with my new family.